we have seen already in the sanctuary, its structure, its rituals.
咁我哋啱先都用咗唔少時間睇咗聖所佢嘅架構同埋佢嘅數字。
We have just revised in the previous lecture the heavenly sanctuary, its presence, its mentioning in the scriptures.
咁我哋亦都係提及到聖經所描寫喺天上面嘅聖所。
And at this point, we need to turn to Daniel chapter 7 and chapter 8.
咁喺呢個時候，我哋嘅注意咧要擺喺但以理書第7同埋第8章。
At this point, I will just touch on the issues that are relevant for the sanctuary.
咁啊，呢個時候咧，我哋或者再點一點關於聖所對我哋嘅個重要性喺邊度？
So let me ask you a very short and quick question.
咁啊，跟住咧，我哋呢啲時間係俾大家發問。
Okay. How many of you have studied the book of Daniel to the point of just having an overview of the book with the prophetic sequences of Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, the sequence of empires? I need just to know how far have you gone in these aspects.
咁你想了解下我哋在日中咧，我哋大家對於即係但以理書
Okay,
有冇咩研讀啊？尤其是咧嗰個預言嘅啲次序性啊，但以理第2章啦、7章、8章啦等等嗰啲預言啊。
So let me see the hands of those.
有讀過嘅，
Okay.
都唔少係嘛？
Thank you.
多謝多謝。
It's important that I take this into consideration because I won't be explaining details of these chapters, but I will touch about the sanctuary.
嗱，好重要。咁但係我哋就冇時間咧去講更多嘅細節，咁所以我哋就會略咁睇一睇，因為今堂咧呢個題目都好重要。
So that, as most of you have already studied, the book of Daniel contains several chapters with prophetic sequences.
咁其實咧，但以理書呢幾章咧，都有講到啲預言性嘅事件咧，係有次序嘅。
So these chapters cover the history of humankind, the prophetic history from the times of Babylon until the end of the age.
換句嚟講咧，今日講緊由但以理開始到今日嗰啲歷史性嘅事件啊嘛。
So in chapter 2, you have that statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw in the dream.
所以第2章就提到尼布甲尼撒王喺夢中所見到嘅一個大象啦。
And each part of the statue represented the successive empire.
咁啊，大象本身每一部分由頂到底，咁啊都講及到歷史嘅嗰個事件咧係有次序噶嘛。
Until the stone came and destroyed everything and occupied the earth.
直到最收尾，有天上面嚟嘅一塊大石就撞冧咗成座大象。
In chapter 7, you have a sequence of animals,
咁啊，
of
跟住第
beasts.
7章嘅時候，你咪見到係有啲獸嘅故事啊嘛。
Each beast represents an empire.
咁所以每一隻獸嘅出現咧，都係代表緊歷史嘅事件，又係有次序嘅。
Then, as a climax of the chapter, you have a vision of the Son of Man approaching the Ancient of Days.
咁啊，跟住咧呢個第7章嗰啲最尾聲嘅時候咧，就出現咗好特別嘅人物咧，就個大象嘅出現咧，就嚟到個歷史嘅終結嘅時候啦。
In chapter 8, we have another sequence.
第8章又另外關於歷史性係有次序嘅事件嘅敘述。
The ram and the goat.
又講到山羊同綿羊。
The ram representing Middle Persia, and the goat representing Greece.
馬來波斯啦，係咪啊？咁啊，山羊代表希臘啦，希臘。
Then a little horn representing Rome, the papacy, and
咁啊，角啊代表羅馬啦，天主教啦。
and the very important statement about the purification of the sanctuary.
咁啊，跟住咧就講到乜嘢？聖所被潔淨。
These 3 chapters, they are in parallel. They recapitulate each other and they add some new emphasis.
呢三章睇好似講緊唔同嘅事，其實係咧講緊歷史性咧，係佢用唔同嘅方法、唔同嘅角度去描寫，大家係講緊緊緊地扣緊嗰個歷史事件嘅。
But keep in mind that they are parallel. They cover basically the same span of time.
所以其實咧，佢三章係平衡式嘅，講緊同一個事件，重述唔同嘅角度擴大。
So this was for the benefit of those who did not raise their hands.
呢個咧就係咪啱先講舉手嘅，有第一節咧就係一個更好嘅機會咧去了解。
So if you have your Bible, open with me in Daniel chapter 8, verse 14.
咁所以讓我哋打開聖經咧，就但以理第8章第14節。
Let's read it in Chinese.
我哋就用中文讀啦，好嗎？他對我說：要到2300日，聖所就必潔淨。
This is a very important message. Until 2,300 mornings and the sanctuary will be purified, will be cleansed.
呢個係一個好重要嘅預言嘅信息嚟㗎。2300日喎，聖所潔淨到底係一回咩事？
When the early pioneers, the early Adventists, started to study the prophecies, and they came to this prophecy, they made calculations based on the chronology of the prophecy.
咁你記得早期教會我哋嘅司儀咧，就讀到呢個咁樣嘅預言嘅故事嘅時候咧，佢就喺度計你哋預言所提及嘅嗰啲時間啊嘛。
And they came to the conclusions that
於是佢有一個結論。
this prophecy would be fulfilled in 1844.
於是佢哋決定就係乜嘢啊？呢個咁嘅預言咧就會去到144年就會應驗。
And since they at that time understood that the sanctuary was the earth, they interpreted the prophecy to be a reference to the second coming of Christ.
咁但係當時佢哋嘅誤解咧就係話咧，嗰個聖所係咪啊？就代表地球喎。所以1844年咁啊，即係聖所被潔淨，就指耶穌嚟到呢個世間上面所成就嘅事。
So according to their view, Christ would come to purify the earth, to purify the sanctuary.
咁所以即係話如果話潔淨聖所嘛，係咪？咁所以耶穌就會嚟到呢個世間就。
As they understood the prophecy, they even were precise enough on the basis of chapter 9 to calculate and reach to the conclusion that the date would be October 22, 1844.
所以佢哋研究得好仔細嘅時候咧，甚至個時間都好仔細喎，係咪啊？去到乜嘢？1844年嘅10月22號啊！
But Christ did not come.
但係結果耶穌冇嚟啊！
And there was a great disappointment.
所以就帶嚟咗大嘅失望。
And I suppose you are familiar with that part of the story.
咁所以呢個故事，我相信大家都幾熟悉。
So they studied the scriptures, and they couldn't find any mistake, any problem in the calculation, in the date itself.
但係跟住咧，佢哋用好多時間就去研究再去計喎，佢覺得都冇錯啊。
Finally, they understood that the problem was not with the date. In fact, something important happened in October 22, 1844.
所以既然研究嚟講都冇錯誤，佢哋認為個日子咧係冇錯嘅，只不過咧個解釋上面咧就可能有啲地方唔明啊。
But it was not the second coming of Christ.
我原來唔係耶穌基督當日要翻嚟。
The sanctuary here is not the earth.
原來咧嗰個聖所都唔係指呢個地球。
The sanctuary here is located in heaven.
原來所講嘅聖所係天上嘅。
And so, studying the scriptures, they understood the two-phase ministry of Christ in the heavenly sanctuary.
原來發現到咧，原來主耶穌佢嘅嗰個侍奉咧係兩層面嘅，地上面嘅同埋天上面嘅。
So this is very important for the Adventist movement, and it became important as a distinctive doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist
所以
Church.
喺整個復臨運動嘅過程中咧，了解呢個咁樣嘅聖所道理咧，就變成本會嘅一個重要嘅道理嚟嘅。
For us today, it seems obvious because you have many and many references of about the heavenly sanctuary in the scriptures.
今日咧，對於我哋嚟講咧，就唔係太大嘅困難啦，因為我哋有 過往俾我哋嘅諸多嘅嗰啲證據同埋經文咧，係俾我哋去明白呢個道理啊嘛。
But for our pioneers, it required a lot of study, a lot of prayer to understand.
但係當時唔係啦嘛，啲先年咧要用幾多時間精力去研究先能夠明白啊，
To understand what happened in 1844.
先能夠了解到底點解啊會主耶穌喺天上面，原來佢仲有崇事嘅。
So now what we should look at some details in this passage.
所以讓我哋咧用啲時間去了解啊嗰啲仔細嘅。
So we Seventh-day Adventists, we affirm that the sanctuary referred to in Daniel 8:14 is the heavenly sanctuary.
好俾我哋能夠更加確據啊，就話咧原來咧呢個2300所講1844年嘅問題咧，嗰個聖所咧係天上嘅。
But evangelicals, they don't agree with us.
但係分派咧，佢哋唔接受呢套嘅。
And so critical scholars, they say that this is the earthly temple
對於佢哋講咧，都係啊，都係講地上嘅嘛。
that was desecrated by Antiochus Epiphanes and later on was purified, reconsecrated.
係當時歷史事件中呢個安提芬尼咧係毀滅咗呢個地上面嘅地方嘅時候咧，咁先至毀滅咗啦，所以喺地上嘅。
So our task now is to look at this text again
我哋而家暫就要睇下聖經裏邊點樣俾佢支持話咧所講嘅唔係地上面嘅，而係天上面嘅。
and see what evidence we have here to support our view that this is the heavenly sanctuary.
好俾我哋有更多嘅支持咧，話聖經所講嘅的確係發生喺天上面。
In order to understand this, we need to put chapter 7 and chapter 8 side by side.
咁所以如果我哋想了解嘅話咧，咁你就要將第7同埋第8章咧，即係平排。
And this is what you have on the screen.
佢就幫你列出嚟啦，第7同第8章咧平排嚟睇啦。
So as I said before, these chapters, they are to be understood is parallel, describing the same events, basically.
咁所以你當你並排嘅時候咧，你見到佢哋描寫嘅咧，原來真係同樣嘅事嚟噶喎。
So one recapitulates the other.
咁所以其中一個咧就嘗試去解釋另外一個。
And I hope these two columns here will help you visualize this.
咁所以大家去睇嘅時候咧，咁會容易更係形象化嗬。
Let's look at chapter 7.
咁睇第7章，
See the sequence of world empires symbolized by the different animals.
所以你見到當時嘅國度咧，就用唔同嘅動物去表達。
So there you have the lion, the bear, the leopard, the four heads, the fourth animal, the little horn, and the heavenly judgment.
咁啊，呢邊第7章咧就用咗幾種嘅動物喺度。
This starts with Babylon, represented by the lion,
巴比倫啦，獅子代表巴比倫啦。
and gets to the little horn that represents the power that persecuted God's people.
咁啊，於是嚟到小國嘅時候咧，就係迫害。
That we understand to be the papacy.
咁呢個就係
So this is the sequence of Daniel 7.
羅馬天主教。
If you study Daniel 7, Adventist interpretation, you'll see this very clearly.
咁所以當我哋研究，尤其是我哋本會嘅歷史同埋神學嘅時候咧，
In the
清楚
other
啦。
In the other column, Daniel 8, you see the equivalent empires but with different symbols.
咁第8章咧就用咗另外啲代表性嘅動物啦。
So you do not have there the lion, the equivalent of the lion in Daniel 8.
但係你睇第8章咧都冇講到巴比倫嘅動物喎。
Because when Daniel received that vision, Babylon was no longer relevant in the world history, in the world scenery.
咁你就要知道，但係佢寫嗰個但以理書嘅時候咧，佢寫到第8章嘅時候咧，嗰、個歷史時期咧已經過咗啦嘛，已經唔係講巴比倫嗰方面已經過咗嘛，所以佢咪冇提巴比倫咯。
But for the bear in Daniel 7, we have the ram in Daniel 8.
但係第8章嘅公綿羊咧，就對住第7章嘅個熊啦。
Both represent Medo-Persia.
嗱，兩邊咧都代表緊同一個王國。
And so you have
波斯。
so you have the sequence of the same powers.
所以你會見到咧，佢哋兩邊都係代表緊同一個王國或者王朝嘅。
Now the climax, the most important thing here in Daniel 7 is the last scene, heavenly judgment.
第7章高住嘅地方咧， 就係最深咧見到嘅係乜嘢？審判。
So in this heavenly judgment, we have something really interesting that is happening there.
呢啲見到講緊各種王朝，最深嘅就係天上嘅審判。
Let's go to Daniel chapter 7, verses 9 through 14.
7章
Let's read it in Chinese.
第7到14節啊，7 to 14。
Please follow us in your Bibles.
7 to 14。
Yes, no, verse 9 through 14.
9 through 14，第7章第9至14節都幾長啊！留意聽。我正觀看的時候，有寶座設立，上面坐着亘古常存者，他的衣服潔白如雪，頭髮如純正的羊毛。寶座是火焰，其輪為烈火，有火如河湧出，從他面前流出來。侍奉他的有千千，在他面前侍立的有萬萬。他坐着要行審判，案卷都展開。於是我觀看，因這個説誇大的話，我正觀看的時候，那獸被殺，身體被毀，扔在火中焚燒。其餘的獸權柄都被奪去，生命卻得以延續，直到所定的時候和日期。第13節，我在夜間的異象中觀看，看下有一位像人子的駕着天上的雲而來，被領到亘古常在者面前。第14節，他得了權柄、榮耀、國度，使各方各國各族的人都侍奉他。他的權柄是永遠的，不能廢去，他的國度必不敗壞。
So this is a scene where the prophet depicts the throne of God.
嗱，佢描寫係咩嚟㗎？係天上嘅寶座嘅景象。
So you have the Ancient of Days, you have flames of fire, and you have books that are opened.
亘古嘅案卷捲開嘅
And
嘅寶座榮耀。
books in this context represents judgment.
案卷打開，案啊嘛，案卷啊嘛，審判。
Something very important is about to occur.
所以即係話好重要嘅事即將發生。
Next, as the text describes,
咁跟住描寫係乜嘢？
we have here the Son of Man coming to the Ancient of Days, surrounded by the clouds of heaven.
哇！有一位榮耀嘅一位，咁啊就4位都有雲彩跟住嚟。
So the Son of Day in Daniel 7 does not come to earth.
你咪見到咧，所描寫咧，佢冇嚟到地上喎。
Instead, he goes to the Ancient of Days.
因為點解咧？佢去到亘古嘅時候，
It's not a vertical movement from heaven to earth,
所以佢嘅行動咧唔係天上落嚟個垂直嘅行動啊，
but a horizontal movement in heaven.
原來咧係一個打橫嚟嘅，係空間打橫去嘅，係天上進行嘅。
In which the Son of Man comes to the Ancient of
係
Days.
人子嘛，人子嘅來臨咧係咁樣嘅。
So everything here is happening in heaven.
所以你會見到啱先所讀嘅經文所描寫咧係天上嘅。
What is the equivalent of this scene in chapter 8?
咁呢度所見到嘅景象，第8章嘅時候有冇雷同嘅描寫咧？
Look at the chart in the screen.
咁你睇一睇第8章呢度所講嘅。
What verses in chapter 8 are equal to 7, 9 through 14?
好啦，如果話平衡啊嘛，係咪？咁啊描寫到天上面嘅事嘅時候，邊幾節第8章度有描寫到咧？
So what it says there, Daniel 8, 13 through 14.
咁原來咧就係第8章13、14節就平衡咗第7章9至14節喎。
These two verses are the counterpart of Daniel 7, 9 through 14.
所以你見到咧，描寫係同一件事，分開兩個地方嚟記載。
Now please read Daniel 8, 13 through 14.
好，第8章有13同埋14兩節。我聽見有位聖者説話，又有一位聖者向那説話的聖者説：這經常獻的債，帶嚟荒涼的罪過， 聖所與軍隊被踐踏嘅異象，要持續到幾時呢？他對我說：要到2300日，聖所就必潔淨。
So these are the verses that describe that talks about the purification of the sanctuary.
咁兩章描寫到天上面嘅事呢，都
After-
係講緊話潔淨聖所嘅事。
After 3,000 mornings, evenings, and mornings.
所以2300嘅早晚，咁啊聖所就被潔淨。
So the point is, if these are parallel events,
所以第7同第8章一齊睇嘅時候，如果所指嘅大家都係平衡描述嘅，咁下邊嘅應該就係同一樣嘢啦。但係佢又描寫清楚話係天上嘅景象嚟噶嘛。
the sanctuary referred to in Daniel 8:13 through 14
咁所以第8章描寫到嘅嗰個潔淨聖所嘅一個兩節經文呢，
must be the heavenly sanctuary.
咁應該就係天上嘅事啊嘛，係咪啊？
Because Daniel 7:9 through 14 is describing a scene in heaven.
因為第7章嗰度描寫係天上邊啊嘛。
So this you have different portrayals, different portraits of the same event.
所以唔同角度、唔同嘅敘述咧，但係大家重述同一件事，
Different perspectives,
唔同嘅角度，
but the event is the same.
事件係一樣嘅。
It's the day of atonement in the heavenly sanctuary.
即係話結論就係話喺天上嘅聖所被潔淨。
And there are some details about Daniel 9 that I would mention briefly.
咁啊，我哋都稍微講一講第9章啦。
It's interesting that an evangelical scholar wrote an article about Daniel 7.
福音佢哋講到呢度嘅時候咧，佢哋有唔同嘅敘述嘅方法。
And when he came to Daniel 7:9 through 14, he said something that really strikes an Adventist.
咁當佢哋睇到第章9至14節嘅時候咧，佢哋都講話有大事發生。
He said that that image of the Son of Man surrounded by the clouds of heaven, approaching the Ancient of Days, is a Day of Atonement.
佢哋話嗰個由雲彩遮蓋而嚟到嗰一位咧，就係帶嚟咗 bring atonement，就帶嚟咗贖罪。
And he mentions the earthly tabernacle.
咁但係講到呢樣嘢嘅時候咧，佢哋係指話係地上面嘅聖所。
When the high priest, surrounded by a cloud of incense, would enter the most holy place.
咁佢哋就解釋話咧係大祭司，佢就四圍咧係有嗰個香陪同，就嚟到去贖罪。
So for this evangelical scholar, Daniel 7:9 through 14 is Day of Atonement.
所以佢哋的確話咧，呢、個就係贖罪嘅事件發生，不過喺地上嘅。
So he was very Adventist in this detail.
嗱，呢個睇法就同我哋就係好唔同噶啦。
So if you accept that and go now to Daniel 8:13 through 14, you have Day of Atonement. Of
咁我就
course.
睇佢講嘅 The Evangelical Scholar talk about，
Because
即係講話關於第8章嘅時候，你睇點樣睇法？
the parallelism of the two chapters requires that.
因為咧，我哋明白到話咧，你要了解呢件事就係要兩章一齊睇噶嘛，係咪啊？咁睇佢哋又點樣睇嗰段經文咧？
So this is a very powerful argument.
所以當我哋想有力地去證明我哋所有信嘅時候咧，我哋就要兩章嚟一齊睇。
That the sanctuary referred to in Daniel 8:14 is the heavenly sanctuary.
咁我哋嘅結論咧就係話，冇錯，聖所被潔淨應該就係天上發生嘅。
And this passage is foundational for our understanding of the sanctuary.
咁呢個係對於我哋整個聖所道理嘅理解係個基礎嚟嘅。
So what is going on in heaven in 1844? What started to happen there?
如果係咁嘅話咧，咁天上面所發生嘅聖所事件，到底係指咩特別嘅事件咧？
Is the judgment of the people of God.
係審判神嘅子民。
So Christ started a special work of judgment, investigative judgment.
耶穌基督 佢喺天上面開始咗審判工作，嗰就係審判佢嘅子民。
examining the records of all those who profess to have faith in him throughout history.
就喺度審判睇下，即係凡係信靠承認基督嘅佢嘅子民。
He started with those who were already dead, and in some time before the end, he will do the work for the living.
咁佢審判嘅時候，審判信靠佢嘅時候，邊度開始咧？就由嗰啲已經過咗身嘅、死咗嘅嗰啲義人開始。
So this investigative judgment is very important because it reveals to the universe that God is not arbitrary.
咁呢個咁樣嘅審判事件啊，即係審判神嘅子民呢件事件咧，即係想説明咧，話上帝咧，佢唔係獨裁嘅。
Before the final decision is reached, there must be an investigation, a judgment, an examination of records.
即係世界末日之前咧，佢就應該有一個公平嘅一個審判，俾全世界嘅無論邊定有點樣都清楚明白話，神嘅作為咧係公正嘅。
This is not because God needs that.
其實審判嘅工作係為邊個咧？神唔需要嘅，佢唔需要知道嘅。
Or because of some limitation in God.
又或者佢可能有啲局限啩，佢有啲嘢唔清楚啩，所以要審判嚟知道啩，又唔係喎。
God could decide everything in a flash of a second.
咁唔需要一切，神都可以做任何決定㗎啦。
But because God wants us and rational beings in the universe to know.
原來所有呢一切嘅審判咧，都係為整個天庭其他嘅生靈啊，都可以明白神嘅作為係公正嘅。
The basis of his decisions. The foundation for his decisions. Why he decided so.
所以原來咧，佢所作嘅審判，佢最尾所作嘅決定咧，個基礎就係要全天庭都明白佢嘅公平。
So investigative judgment and sanctuary is not a reason for us to fear God.
所以如果呢個係事實嘅話咧，咁你同我使乜驚上帝咧？嗬，或者使乜驚審判咧？
It is a great reason for us to love God even more.
就因為咁嘅緣故啊，所以我哋更加愛上帝。
There are many questions that we can't answer now when it comes to the plan of salvation and a lot of things that we would like to know.
因為我哋就可以更加樂意去明白我哋之前都唔能夠明白嘅關於神嘅愛啦等等。
But for sure, when we get to heaven, there will be answers to our questions.
所以好多問題我哋都唔明白。咁啊嚟到天國嘅時候咧，咁因為係公平啊嘛，於是我哋就可以明白更多關於上帝嘅事。
Because an investigative judgment happened.
因為事實上咧，審判都已經實現咗啦。
And this will be open to everybody.
因為一切嘅時候都可以坐開嚟睇㗎嘛。
We do not have much time to elaborate on the details of that.
咁啊，仲有好多細節咧，我哋都冇咁多時間係可以慢慢解説。
But our purpose with these presentations
今日喺我哋呢幾次嘅嗰個分享中咧，我哋都應該達到我哋嘅目標。
is to bring to your attention the importance of the doctrine of the sanctuary.
就係想大家咁明白到我哋呢個聖所嘅道理係幾咁重要。
Because if we neglect this distinctive doctrine,
因為如果我哋疏忽咗呢個咁嘅獨一嘅一個咁嘅道理嘅話，
if we lose it for not using it,
如果我哋冇去使用佢而失咗呢種咁樣嘅要道嘅理解嘅話，
because if you don't use it, if you don't revise it, you ended up forgetting it.
因為如果我哋唔會用佢，
It becomes
嘅
irrelevant.
話咧，咁我哋會忘記啊嘛，咁呢就唔重要啊嘛。
And if this happens, there's no reason for us to exist as a movement with a message for the world.
咁如果係有忘記喎，又覺得唔重要喎，咁你又何必咁辛苦去傳揚呢個咁樣嘅信息咧？
Our identity,
我哋嘅身份嘅特徵，
the reason for our existence,
我哋之所以存在，
our mission,
我哋嘅使命
is grounded, dependent on the doctrine of the sanctuary.
就係基於呢個咁樣嘅聖所。
Because it's there that we find that we are special.
獎係呢樣嘢嘛，所以佢咪同人哋唔同咯，咪特別咯。
And we were raised as special people for a special mission.
因為我哋要喺呢個環境中，喺咁嘅信仰裏邊咧，係可以即係出咗嚟一班獨特嘅子民。
So in these 3 presentations,
所以喺我過去嘅介紹嘅呢3個咁樣嘅議題裏邊，
we started with the earthly tabernacle.
我哋由地上嘅聖所開始嘛，
Then we moved to the heavenly temple,
跟住我哋又去到天上嘅聖所啊嘛，
trying to see the scriptures, the correspondence between the heavenly reality and the earthly counterparts.
嘗試去了解話咧，原來地上嘅聖裏邊，天上嘅聖所咧係可以平衡去了解嘅。
And by doing this,
咁啊，當我哋咁樣做嘅時候，
we hope to have made clear
咁我哋就希望可以更清楚。
that the doctrine of the sanctuary was not an invention of the pioneers to explain the disappointment.
咁所以原來呢個咁嘅聖所度咧，唔係嘗試話去揾一啲答案咧，去解答點解嗰個會大失望嘅經驗。
But it's grounded on the biblical text itself.
而事實上咧，我哋呢個咁嘅聖所度咧，的確你喺聖裏面揾到答案噶嘛。
And this is a very important message.
所以呢個係一個好重要嘅信息。
I spoke in the previous lecture about those 3 evangelical scholars who are very concerned about what Christ is doing today in heaven.
咁我哋就先前就提到話咧，亦都有啲福音派嘅學者咧，佢哋都想了解下到底呢個咁嘅天上面嘅崇事係點樣一回事。
Because they understand that it's important to know and to understand, according to the scriptures, what Christ is doing now.
所以其實呢個都係我哋嘅態度啦，我哋要了解到現今到底主耶穌喺度做緊乜嘢。
Christ did not abandon us when he ascended to heaven.
所以其實耶穌嗰佢升天之後咧，佢並冇拋棄我哋，
He went there to perform a special work.
因為佢現時有一個特別嘅崇事。
But of course, the evangelical understanding is very limited. The way they explain is not connected with the global understanding of scriptures and other doctrines that come to support it.
所以其他教會佢哋對呢方面嘅了解咧，就有好多個缺陷啦。佢哋唔能夠係整體性地，或者係整個世界嚟睇，甚至整個天地嚟睇嗰件事，所以佢哋就比較有限。
When it comes to understand what Christ is doing today in heaven, we have the fuller light.
咁所以當我哋了解到主耶穌都喺天上面，佢喺度做緊嘅事情嘅時候咧，咁佢就有更多嘅亮光。
And we have the responsibility and the privilege to understand it,
咁我哋有咁樣嘅特權去明白呢件事，
to live according to this doctrine,
係咧。
to live according to this doctrine,
所以我哋就更加應該係活出呢個信仰嘅嗰個正義，
and to proclaim it.
同埋咧就要宣揚。
I think this is enough for now. Thank you very much for your attention.
或者各位所介紹嘅，我都認為都已經足夠。
We have 20 minutes.
我哋依家咧大概有20分鐘。
I received some questions.
今日我就收到一啲嘅問題，
I'm not sure I have answers for these questions,
嗱唔一定可能會有答案㗎。
but I will answer them briefly, and then in the rest of the time, I would like, with the authorization of my colleagues here, to receive questions. If you have questions, let's use this time for this. So
咁你就嘗試
we still have time for questions tomorrow, but probably it wouldn't be enough for all your questions, your interest in the different lectures that you had here. So let's save this time for some questions, and we have them now, and we save time for tomorrow and for some other opportunities.
我哋明天有答問時間㗎嘛，不過恐怕又唔係好足夠嘅時間啦。咁所以我哋有啲時間咧可以嘗試解答。手上邊咧就有4個問題，4個問題答咗之後咧，如果仲有問題嘅話咧，就嚟轉再翻嚟。
I have some questions here. I think they basically refer to the same curiosity.
咁呢幾個問題似乎有啲共同嘅意思喺度。
How was the sanctuary cleansed? I mean, physically cleansed during the period of the tabernacle,
係啊，
the desert.
潔淨話，咁潔淨嘅觀念係點啊？點樣潔淨法咧？
Not, of course, the ritual cleansing, but the physical cleansing of the blood and things that were performed there.
They're talking about physically cleansing.
Yeah, this is what the question is about, how it was cleansed
好，我哋就嘗試下了解下題目，好似係問乾
or washed.
或者係點樣係清潔或者整潔啊、乾淨啊嗰個叫做啲聖所裏面嗰啲物件啊。
We do not have an absolute answer, a detailed answer for that, because the Bible does not enter into these details.
嗱，如果你講話即係點樣去潔淨嗰個聖所嘅嗰啲咁樣嘅家具咧，咁聖經亦都冇清楚咁去解釋。
If the Bible would give information about these details, probably would need several volumes and not just one.
所以我哋要嚟揾多幾個來源啦，唔係淨係呢度啦。
But you know that the Levites were responsible for helping with the tabernacle.
但係我哋喺聖經裏邊咧就了解到咧，專係負責潔淨聖所嘅係咩嚟㗎？利未人啊！
They were responsible for dismantling it, for the transport of it.
佢哋就專責有搬運兼清潔。
So we presume that in these phases, these times of removing the tabernacle for Israel to set the journey again, they could take advantage and then clean and wash whatever needs to be purified.
所以我哋唯有假設咧，就係利未人喺搬之前或者預完之後，佢哋就會打清潔嘅工作。
Of course, it's an inference. The Bible does not say.
嗱，當然呢個係假設嘅啫嘛，推上嘅啫嘛，喺聖經冇講。
Another question: what is the function of the heavenly sanctuary before the fall?
咁啊喺人犯罪之前啊，潔淨聖所嘅天上嘅聖所啊，有咩功能？
Well, we should understand heavenly sanctuary as the headquarters of God, from where He governs the entire universe. It's where God is.
聖所有神嘅寶座，咁你就可以了解到嗰個地方咧，就係一個中心咧，係統管整個宇宙。
Where the throne of God is, there is the heavenly
因為
sanctuary.
嗰個聖所嗰度啊嘛，就係神嘅寶座啊嘛。
Where we could say different, the throne of God is located inside the heavenly sanctuary.
係啦，咁聖所我哋好清楚嘛，咁啊，至聖所嗰度有一個神嘅寶座，咁啊神就喺嗰度統管住整個宇宙咯。
It's the command center for God's government.
上帝統管行政管理嘅中心。
It is not related to sin
所以你
primarily.
見到咧，呢個咁嘅面係同罪無關嘅，所以唔需要話咧係犯罪前犯罪後，你根本就係個中心統管整個宇宙。
There's another question here that I'm afraid the Bible does not have a precise answer for that.
咁我就恐怕咧呢個問題咧，聖經都冇咩答案嘅。
But anyway, I like these questions because they show that you are interested in the subject.
不過都冇啊，即係表示你對呢個
And this is natural. If you have a reasoning mind, when you look at the things, you ask questions. And this is important. But
喺思想好重要嘅。
let me do my best here. In the wilderness, the Israelites were multitudes.
今日喺曠野嘅時候咧，以色列人好多噶嘛都。
They sinned daily. Okay, they sinned. They committed acts of sin daily.
咁日日都犯罪噶嘛，咁多人。
How could the sanctuary handle all those kinds of sacrifices?
聖所點處理咁多人咧？當時嗰個聖幕啊，點處理咁多人嘅問題？
Well, the Bible does not give us detail of how many sacrifices were offered there.
咁我哋就聖人冇話俾佢聽我咧，即係每日咧到底佢哋再殺咗幾多嘅獻祭？
But understand one thing:
不過有一樣嘢我哋可以明白，
forgiveness of sins
贖罪呢件事咧，
did not depend on the death of an animal.
唔係每一件贖罪咧都一定係同
Frequently in the book
即
of
係犧牲有關係，直接關係。
Frequently in the book of Leviticus, we find that expression, and this person will offer a sacrifice, and it will be forgiven to him. It's a passive. See if you can get this in Chinese, and it will be forgiven to him as a passive voice. If you have that in Chinese.
一個人咧，佢獻祭嗰件咁樣嘅事裏邊咧，佢嘅罪係被饒恕啊，即係唔係叫做係直接嘅，係叫做被動式嘅。啊，被動式嘅話咧，咁即係話咧，佢一定係被饒恕。但係點樣被饒恕咧，就冇講啦，明唔明啊？呢個叫做被動式啊。
That passive means that the subject is God, the agent is God. It is God who forgives. It's not the animal, not the blood of the animal.
因為神饒恕嘛，係咪？冇錯，過去就係你透過啲在世嘅羊啊。咁但係因為佢係被動式嘛，咁你唔知佢到底係殺咗幾多羊啊嘛，或者係點樣啊嘛？總之佢被饒恕，明唔明啊？被饒恕係嗰個被動式啦。總之你嘅罪被饒恕咗咯。
Because God accepted the right, but the right or the ritual itself did not forgive. God forgave. This must be very clear.
所以總之咧，你嘅罪被神饒恕咧，嗰個係重點。至於個過程係點樣咧？呢個反而咧冇咁詳細描寫，所以似乎咧就唔係話咁重要啦。
So coming to the issue here,
咁啊嚟到呢個問題啦。
there were provision to forgive everybody.
換句嚟講咧。要饒恕每一個人咧，呢個咁樣嘅咁樣嘅事咧，就呢個饒恕係供應咗啦。
By means of what God had prescribed in the tabernacle.
透過上帝喺個祭壇，喺嗰個會幕，喺個聖所整年嘅崇事裏邊咧，饒恕呢件事咧就完成咗啦。
But how the tabernacle could handle so many sacrifices, we don't know exactly.
所以至於聖所佢個別係點樣去處理呢件事咧，咁的確係冇講。
But understand that some sacrifices were offered in the tabernacle. They were, let's say, collective. They were offered in favor of the entire nation.
所以呢度會見到咧，又有一個叫做推理啦，就可能就唔係話真係每一件罪咧都有一隻啦，而係整體性嘅。佢群體性嘅、大眾性嘅，可能一次過咧就會饒恕咗好多。
So in principle, by faith, a person, even if this person was not in the tabernacle in that moment when this person sinned, by faith he could accept what was being done in his or her favor by the priest there with the Holocaust and the whole system.
所以當時可能咧唔係呢個人咧，佢喺嗰度咧又獻呢個祭，而係因為佢嘅信心咯。透過佢信心咧，可能有其他嘅獻祭等等咧，但因為佢嘅信心，所以佢罪咧就被饒恕咗啦。
So this may help us understand and answer part of the question.
咁希望呢個咁嘅回答咧可以答咗部分你嘅問題啦。
I think I have some other questions here, but they basically, I think they were answered already.
咁啊，睇嚟我手上面嘅問題咧都可以答，都答咗。
And we still have 10 minutes for questions related to whatever you have. The veil that was tainted, cleansed, how it was washed. The question here is, how was the veil washed?
聖所至聖所中間唔係有個幔子嘅，咁啊即係獻祭啊，或者係崇事中嘅時候咧，咁佢咪會彈啲血咪有血跡啦，係咪？咁啊潔淨嘅話咧，點潔淨咧？係咪拆咗嗰個幕嗰個幔子，咁樣就你就去洗咧？
According to Leviticus 16. According to Leviticus 16,
按照利未記嘅16章，
the blood was not applied to the veil.
嗰個 污染啊，唔一定係喺嗰個聖幕啊。
but sprinkled in front of the veil.
嗰個描寫嘅情況咧，就似乎咧係喺寶座前或者係幔前啊，即係好遠嘅，未必係個幔字，係幔前啊。
Second question here. Azazel was released, but Satan was destroyed. Why the typologies were different?
天使就被釋放，撒旦就被毀滅。咁點解喺預表上邊咧會唔同咧？阿瑟謝。
So the point, okay. The point is, if it's typology, it can't be exactly the same.
但係如果係預表嘅話咧，咁你就好難話全十味地去預表晒噶嘛。
Because the type is limited, so it cannot be exactly the same.
因為咧講緊預表嘅時候咧，佢梗係有佢嘅限度喺度㗎，唔能夠完全表達晒咁清楚嘅。
But the main point that Azazel as a ritual represented was the removal of sin from the sanctuary, from the tabernacle.
所以佢能夠係預表佢嗰個精義、嗰個中心嘅嗰個思想。
And in this aspect, the typology is I would say it's perfect.
所
Magic,
以如果
exactly.
係咁睇嘅話咧，阿瑟謝拉所預表嘅嗰件事咧，被帶到去被毀滅咗咧，咁嗰個精義已經係代表晒，可以解釋晒嘅。
Last question. If the high priest was struck dead in the most holy place, how did the priesthood continue if this happened?
咁如果呢一位嘅大祭司，佢入去至聖所裏邊，不幸地死咗啦，咁佢嘅後繼係點樣㗎？
Well, in the scriptures we have just
點啊 ？OK， 咁被擊殺咗啦喎，咁佢嘅屬事咪一半咯，咁嗰個潔淨咁點完成啊？
we have only one episode recorded in the Bible that something happened like that in the sanctuary.
睇嚟似乎咧，即係聖經咁嘅描寫法，
Was the
就
death-
似乎係曾經發生過咁嘅事。
Was the death of Nadab and Abihu, because they offered the two sons of Aaron,
亞倫嘅兩個仔，
because they offered strange fire in the tabernacle.
亞倫兩個仔啊，獻燔火，咪被擊殺啊嘛。
And we have the details that the Bible revealed in Leviticus chapter 8, 9, 9, 10. Chapter
所以
10.
喺
Yeah.
你哋記，你可以見到就8至10章嗰度咧，就喺呢段入面有描寫。
So if you want to know what happened, how this situation was handled, this is the only information that we have.
呢個話問其他嘅咧，我都唔知點答你啦。不過你睇翻個故事咧，就似乎有講話咧，兩個人死咗啦，咁點咧？
Last question. I said that was the last, but I found another one here. Why Revelation 21:22 mentioned there is no temple in the new city?
喺嗰個新地啊，點解咧？
New Jerusalem, yeah.
喺個新耶路撒冷入邊啊，咁就話冇電咯喎，咁啟著啊嘛，咩意思咧？冇電咯喎。
Actually, the New Jerusalem itself functions like a temple.
其實咧，聖城啊，耶路撒冷城啊，佢嘅嗰個功能啊，就好似聖殿，
So it's in the form of a cube,
因為佢嘅嗰個情況咧，就係一個正方形，
which was the shape of the most holy place of the temple and the tabernacle.
因為佢嘅一個設計咧，就係至聖所嘅個設計嚟噶嘛。
So in a sense, we could say that the New Jerusalem is not just a temple, it's the most holy place.
所以我哋又可以咁樣了解話咧，原來呢個新耶路撒冷咧，聖城咧，就係代表咗個聖殿。
And inside it will be the throne of God.
咁即係話咧，其實上都係喎，就喺個聖耶路撒冷裏面咧， 有乜嘢？喺神嘅寶座。
And with this question, we could say that the climax of the sanctuary, of the doctrine of the sanctuary, of everything that the sanctuary may teach us,
所以你見到嗱，就算你問個問題咧嚇，一集中佢哋嘅時候咧，你見到咧，似乎咧整個即係要道嘅中心咧，就係個聖所嘅道理嚟。
it will be the consummation of God's ultimate desire.
呢個就係見到話咧，係神嘅嗰個渴望啊，嗰個期望咧，佢去到終極嘅時候咧，就喺個聖所裏邊完成嘅。
That is to live with His people forever.
佢嘅目的就係話，無論係地上、天上度咧，佢嘅目的就係話神與人同住。
In the tabernacle, in the desert, that process was very limited. The people did not have access to God directly. It was by means of the priesthood.
咁啊，當地上嘅聖所嘅時候咧，你見到即係咁多人咧，佢哋有陣時好難直接去嚟到神嘅面前啊嘛，好多時候都要透過祭司嘛，或者遞祭司嘛。
But in the New Jerusalem, we have direct access to God.
但係當去到天上嘅聖城嘅時候咧，咁我哋就可以直接嚟到神嘅面前。
Revelation says that we will be priests, so we'll have access
點解
to
啊？因
God.
為聖經都話你咪祭司咯。
So this is a wonderful promise,
哇！呢個係一個非常之好嘅應許。
and I hope to meet you there, and I hope to be there. Thank you very much.
我自己會喺個聖所度，亦會喺呢度見到你哋。Thank you very much.